Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, especially if you're a college football fan. It's a long off season, and I'm here to get you through it. We also have a great website designed and created by Joey Foster. 8 great writers led by our head writer, Michael Walker. And of course, I have to mention our merchandise store. We have a lot of great stuff over there. I ordered my shirts, and I'm sure you'll find something you like as well. On to today's video, and I already did my video on preseason FPI Top 25. What a joke that is. Now they came out with the Top 25 hardest schedules for 2022 based on that FPI. Some of it I agree with, but of course some of it I do not agree with. Let's start with number 25, the 25th hardest schedule according to the FPI, and that's going to be Missouri. Here's Missouri's 2022 college football schedule. First they get Louisiana Tech at home, at Kansas State, FCS Abilene Christian at home, at Auburn, Georgia at home, at Florida, then they get their bye week, Vanderbilt at home, at South Carolina, Kentucky, at Tennessee, New Mexico State at home, and then Arkansas at home. I mean, their out of conference isn't all that bad. Road trip to Kansas State, that could be tricky. Then the rest of their road trips at Auburn, at Florida, at South Carolina, at Tennessee. I mean, that's fairly tough, but it's not brutal. Missouri might have a top 25 schedule. Number 24, that's going to be Louisville. Here's their schedule. They start off the season with 2 road trips. First at Syracuse and then at UCF. Yikes, that's a rough start right there. Then they get Florida State at home, then they get South Florida at home, then on the road to Boston College, and then another road to Virginia, and they get their bye week, and they get Pitt at home, Wake Forest at home, James Madison at home, then at Clemson, NC State at home, at Kentucky. Louisville has a tough first half of the schedule, and then the second half lightens up just a little bit, although they do have a road trip to Clemson and Kentucky. I do think this is a top 25 schedule. In fact, I think this should be even higher. That's a rough schedule right there. Number 23 is going to be Penn State. Here's a look at their schedule. They start off the season with a road trip to Purdue, then they get Ohio at home, then back on the road to Auburn, Central Michigan at home, Northwestern at home, then they get their bye week at Michigan, Minnesota at home, Ohio State's at home, at Indiana, Maryland, at Rutgers, and then Michigan State. I'm not sure if this is a top 25 schedule as far as the difficulty level. I mean, they're out of conference. Yes, they do have a road trip to Auburn. Besides that, Ohio, Central Michigan, and their toughest road trip is to Auburn, and then a road trip to Michigan, but that's it. I'm not sure if this is a top 25 schedule as far as difficulty goes. Number 22 is going to be Michigan State. Here's a look at their schedule. First, they get Western Michigan at home, Akron at home, road trip to Washington. That's pretty much a cross-country trip right there. Then they get Minnesota at home, at Maryland, Ohio State's at home this year, Wisconsin's at home, then they get their bye week, then back-to-back road trips at Michigan and at Illinois. Then Rutgers at home, Indiana at home, at Penn State. Once again, not sure if this is a top 25 schedule as far as difficulty goes. I mean, that road trip to Washington and out of conference, that could be tough, but Washington has been down. And then 2 tough road trips to Michigan and Penn State. But for the most part, this is not that difficult of a schedule. Top 25? Maybe, but I'm not sure. Number 21 is going to be Syracuse. Here's a look at their schedule. They start off the season with Louisville at home, then at UConn, Purdue at home, Virginia at home, FCS Wagner at home, then they get their bye week, then they get NC State at home, then on the road to Clemson, then they get Notre Dame at home, then on the road to Pitt, then they get Florida State at home, and they end the season with 2 road trips, at Wake Forest and at Boston College. 4 of their last 6 games are on the road. I would say this is a pretty difficult schedule, but they're out of conference, not so tough. They do get Purdue, but that's at home, and their only road trip out of conference is to UConn. I mean, that's a tough stretch at the end. I will say at Clemson, at Pitt, and at Wake Forest, that's a difficult road slate. That's literally the most difficult part of their schedule. The rest of their schedule, not all that bad. Number 20 is going to be Wisconsin. Here's a look at their schedule. You get FCS Illinois State at home, then you get Washington State at home, and they get New Mexico State at home. And they start Big Ten play at Ohio State, Illinois at home, at Northwestern, then at Michigan State, and they get Purdue at home, then they get their bye week, and they get Maryland at home, then back-to-back road trips to Iowa and Nebraska, and then finally a home game against Minnesota. I would say this is pretty difficult. Out of conference, not all that bad. FCS, a group of 5, and then Washington State at home. But road trips to Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa, and Nebraska, that's pretty tricky right there. Yeah, I'd put this in the top 20. Number 19, my team, West Virginia. Here's a look at their schedule. They start off the season with the backyard brawl on the road at Pitt. Then they get Kansas at home. Then they get Towson at home. And then another rivalry on the road for the Black Diamond Trophy at Virginia Tech. Then at Texas. Then they get their bye week. They get Baylor at home. At Texas Tech. TCU at home. At Iowa State. And they get Oklahoma at home. Kansas State at home. And at Oklahoma State. I think what really bumps up the difficulty for West Virginia's schedule is the out of conference. 2 of them are bitter rivals, and they're both on the road. So I agree, it is a top 20 toughest schedule. Next up, number 18, Maryland. Here's their schedule. Buffalo at home, at Charlotte, SMU at home, at Michigan, Michigan State at home, Purdue at home, at Indiana, Northwestern at home. And they get their bye week, then back-to-back road trips to Wisconsin, then to Penn State, and they get Ohio State at home, and then Rutgers. I'm not seeing the difficulty difficulty here. I mean, they are in the Big Ten, so automatically that's a difficult schedule. But if you look at their road trips, at Michigan, at Wisconsin, at Penn State, that's literally the toughest part of their schedule because their out of conference is a joke. And they do get Ohio State at home. So maybe a top 25 toughest schedule, but I wouldn't put them in the top 20. That's just me. Number 17, Ole Miss. Here's their schedule. Troy at home, Central Arkansas at home, then at Georgia Tech. That's a weird one. Then they get Tulsa at home, Kentucky at home, at Vanderbilt, then Auburn at home, at LSU, and then at Texas A&M. So back-to-back road trips. Then they get their bye week. Alabama's a home game this year, and at Arkansas and Mississippi State at home. Well, first off, their out of conference is a joke. The road trip to Georgia Tech, that's not difficult at all these days. And then the rest is cake. Road trips to LSU, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, yes, that's difficult. But overall, I think Ole Miss actually has a good schedule this year. I think it sets up nicely for them to have at least a 10-win season. Number 16, Iowa. Here's their schedule. South Dakota State at home, then Nevada at home, then at Rutgers, Michigan at home, at Illinois, then they get their bye week, and at Ohio State, Northwestern, at Purdue, Wisconsin at home, at Minnesota, and then Nebraska at home. I like what they did with their out of conference. Of course, they get Iowa State every year, but throwing Nevada in there, Nevada's pretty good. South Dakota State's a really good FCS team, but their road trips at Ohio State and at Purdue, that's the toughest road trips they have. Not sure if this is a top 20 schedule as far as difficulty goes. Number 15, Florida. Here's a look at their schedule. Start off the season with Utah at home, then they get Kentucky at home, then they get South Florida at home, then on the road to Tennessee, then they get FCS Eastern Washington at home, then they get Missouri at home, then they get LSU at home, then they get their bye week, then they get Georgia in Jacksonville, that neutral game they play every year. Last 4 games, 3 of them on the road. First on the road to Texas A&M, then they get South Carolina at home, then at Vanderbilt, and then at Florida State. Once again, I don't think this is a top 15 schedule. Maybe not even a top 25 schedule. I mean, the last 4 games, yes, that's difficult, but at Vanderbilt, at Florida State, really how tough are those 2 road trips? At Texas A&M, I'll give you that, but overall, I just don't see it. I don't see this as a tough schedule, to be honest with you. I do like that they scheduled Utah, but it's at home. Number 14, this is going to be the Texas Longhorns. Here's a look at their schedule. First, they get UL Monroe, then Alabama at home, then UTSA at home. Then they start Big 12 play at Texas Tech and West Virginia at home. Then, of course, the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma in Dallas. Then they get Iowa State at home, then at Oklahoma State. Then they get their bye week at Kansas State, TCU at home, at Kansas, and then Baylor at home. Having Alabama on your schedule will bump the difficulty up. So I definitely think it's a top 25. I definitely think it's a top 20. But top 15, not sure about that. I mean, they get Oklahoma State on the road, but that's it. They get Baylor at home, they get West Virginia at home, they get Iowa State at home, and then, of course, the neutral game against Oklahoma. I just don't see this as a top 15 schedule. Number 13, Arkansas. Last year, I had Arkansas as the number 1 most difficult schedule. Here's a look at their schedule this year. First, they get Cincinnati at home, then they get South Carolina at home, then they get FCS Missouri State at home, then they play Texas A&M in Arlington, they do get Alabama at home, then at Mississippi State, and then a road trip to BYU smack dab in the middle of their schedule. Then they get their bye week, then another road trip to Auburn. That's 3 road trips in a row. And they get Liberty at home, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and then at Missouri. This is a difficult schedule. Road slate, not all that bad, although they do have to go on the road to BYU and Auburn, but they did schedule Cincinnati a home game. They get Texas A&M in Arlington. Alabama's a home game this year. Yeah, I think this is a top 15 tough schedule. Number 12 is going to be Notre Dame. Yeah, you heard me, Notre Dame. Usually Notre Dame wouldn't crack the top 25. This year, according to the FBI, number 12. They start off the season with the road trip to Ohio State. That'll do it. Then they get Marshall at home. Then they get Cal at home. After that, on the road to North Carolina, they get their bye week. Then they get BYU in Las Vegas. That's basically a home game for BYU. Then they get Stanford at home, UNLV at home, tricky road trip to Syracuse. They do get Clemson this year, but it is at home. They get Navy in Baltimore, Boston College at home, and then at USC. Yes, this is a difficult schedule. I'd put it top 10. And this is why I have Notre Dame going 8-4 this year, because this is an actual tough schedule, unlike the past 5 to 10 years. Good luck, Notre Dame. That's a toughie right there. Number 11 on this list, Rutgers. Here's a look at their schedule. They start off the season at Boston College, then FCS Wagner, and at Temple, Iowa at home, road trip to Ohio State, Nebraska at home, then they get their bye week, Indiana at home, then at Minnesota, Michigan at home, at Michigan State, Penn State at home, and then at Maryland. Well, for one thing, they don't have to play themselves, so that's going to make the schedule more difficult. Their out of conference is so-so, road trips to Boston College and Temple, but a road trip to Ohio State and Michigan State, that bumps up the difficulty schedule. I'd say this is a top 15 tough schedule. Y'all let me know in the comments section, do you agree with these rankings? I look forward to your comments on this particular topic. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.